من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلوات وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. This particular program is an introduction to the purpose, the aims, the benefits of studying logic. It's not a course in logic itself, but rather just sharing some important key points that I believe are necessary for every person, Hausa student or non-Hausa student, to understand as far as realizing why should we study logic. Now, if you are someone who is eager in learning about Islam and gaining more depth in your knowledge and understanding the importance of ilm and seeking of knowledge, and you might not be at that particular stage where you want to pursue a Hausawi life and enter into the Hausa. You might not be someone who is studying Islamic studies on a full-time basis, but you have an interest. If so, whether you are any of these categories, someone who is a Hausa student, someone who is studying full-time Islamic studies, someone who is eager to learn about Islam on a deeper basis, then it is necessary to equip yourself with certain ulum, certain sciences. And one of these sciences is ilmul mantiq, the science of logic. And I'm going to refrain from saying Islamic logic, even though we have, alhamdulillah, a very strong heritage of logic presented by Islamic scholars. And when I use the word logic again, even though, yes, it does stem back all the way to its founder, Aristoteles, or Aristotle of Thales, but at the same time, it was expanded and nurtured and widened so much by the Muslim ulama. And that's why it continued to flourish. Aristotelian logic continued to flourish throughout the different eras of the Islamic world and until this very day. And that's why it's one of the main subjects in the Islamic studies curriculum. Now, one of the things, of course, which inshallah I will be discussing is that unfortunately those who are within the Islamic studies system, Hausawi or academic, might be content with only going through one dawra, one course, one series of logic. But throughout my talk, I will try to emphasize on the point that one will never be enough. A person needs to invest in a lot of energy and effort in studying logic. The same way when you go through your studies of ilmun nahu, of grammar, which you're going to be using all the time. And when you're using this ilmun nahu all the time, you're also going to be studying al-nahw al-wadih, mabadi' al-arabiyya, qatar al-nada, Sharh ibn Aqil, Mughni al-Labib, all of these common books, Al-Ujrumiyya, all of these common books that are usually taught and studied in the Islamic seminary in the Hawza Ilmiya. And so with logic, there needs to be also some kind of effort put beyond the simplified kind of version of logic that some people might, or unfortunately most people might be going through. Of course, this is what the tradition was, and this is what the tradition is. How about for just random everyday people? You know, you're not, a Hausa student, you don't see yourself to be studying many hours a day, or you just don't have the time. You're busy with work or a career or labor or whatnot. Do you need logic? Absolutely yes. Everyone needs mantiq, logic. Even though, it's this word is thrown around so much, it's overused. Everyone says, well, logically this and logically that, and it doesn't make sense here, or what's the sensible thing for this? But they don't realize that logic is a ilm, it's a skill, it's something that a person needs to learn in order for them to understand the many diversities of such a talent. And that's why, unfortunately, outside of the Islamic seminary, outside of the Hausa, outside of in-depth Islamic studies, logic is abandoned, it's neglected. People don't really care much about whether they have gone through a course in logic or not. Now, not to undermine the values of all of the other ulum that we have, inshallah, of course this is just one of a different variety of series that I have in introduction to why should we, why should you study fiqh, why should you study tafsir, al-Quran al-Kareem, why should you study rational sciences? And the reason why I started with logic in this particular case is logic is an introduction to rational sciences. Logic has always been called al-ulum, the mother of sciences, because you are going to be using mantiq, logic, in your ulum aqliya, in your rational sciences, and also in your ulum naqliya, in your transmitted sciences. You are going to be using the principles of mantiq when you enter into the field of usul al-fiqh, the principles of jurisprudence. Obviously, as you know, one of the sources of legislation is al-aql, and that the foundation of al-aql itself is your particular understanding of what the criteria is for correct thinking. And that's exactly what logic is. Logic is a methodology that you use in order to keep your process of thinking correct. The common kind of definition given to علم المنطق is آلة قانونية تعصم مراعاتها الخطأ في الذهن, which means that it is a canonical tool, canon, قانون, a canonical tool that, and the reason why it's called tool is because it is used for others. It is not a science independently looked at for its own purpose, but it is looked at as a means for others. Similar to, you have, for example, ilmul nahu, grammar, Arabic grammar. You use Arabic grammar in order for you to make sure that you speak correctly, that you write correctly, that you talk correctly, as far as the grammatical side of language is concerned. Or ilm al-usul, usul al-fiqh. You're using usul al-fiqh as a means in order for you to be able to understand jurisprudence, fiqh, and be able to derive a fiqhi ruling. With ilm al-mantiq, it is called an ala qanuniya. An ala means tool and instrument, because it is used as a means in order for you to be able to apply it to something else, which is thought process. آلة قانونية تعصم مراعاتها. If you were observant, if you were applying, ri'aya, mura'at, means someone who is observant and someone who is applying it, someone who's implementing it. If you were to implement this canonical tool of logic in general, then you will have isma. Ta'asimu means isma. You will have, your minds will become immune from making mistakes in your thoughts, in your ideas, in what it is that you're presenting. Right, isma and infallibility here means. And of course, this doesn't mean that you will have no flaws in all of your understanding of your thought process. It means that should you observe it in the correct way, in the whole entirety of what it is, and do so with, of course, a correct, sound understanding, then this will lead you to a purity in your understanding and in your thought process. And that's why this is applicable to everyone, whether you are studying religious studies in depth or whether you are occupied with anything else. Whatever you may be into, you will need ilm al-mantaq, you will need logic. Unfortunately, what we do face is, number one, the issue of language barrier, where you might come to realize that, you know what, there aren't so many books on logic from the Islamic heritage, of course, in the understanding of the Muslim ulama and things like that in the English language. And this is going to lead you to kind of like an issue if you're not familiar with Arabic on a technical level, or you don't understand Farsi, or you can't read Urdu or things like that. You know, in these cases, you know, you might see that, well, you know, how am I going to deal with all of this? Alhamdulillah, one of the good things that we have in today's world is there are alternatives in different languages that are available for you. All you need to do is just do a little bit of searching. And also, it's important for you to speak to your local scholar, your local resident alim, and ask them, you know, if they're able to, you know, come up with some kind of program for the general public in giving a series of talks in these different kind of ulum, whatever they may be, but things that will benefit you on a rational level. You know, it's not like I'm not pushing some kind of agenda where everyone needs to, you know, be studying logic and doing nothing else, but at least, you know, increase in that capacity of expanding your aql and ta'aqqul kind of ability, your rationalizing, your intellectual kind of understanding. And that can only be done, you know, if you're going to be exposed to these kind of ulum. Again, I'm going to say a lot of people, you know, frequently overuse this word ilm al-mantiq, and logically this and logic that, but you come to realize that, you know, that's not even a place where logic is applied. You know, there's no application to logic there. It has absolutely no relevance whatsoever to logic. You know, although logically you shouldn't be doing wudu this particular way, or, you know, these kind of examples, obviously everyone has experienced them, where someone uses the word logic out of its particular usage of the place. And that's why we need to understand, well, excuse me, when you said logically this and logic that, you know, what's the understanding of logic that you have? You know, where is it that you are deriving? because even Aristotle himself didn't say this. And so we use logic every day in our lives, even though subconsciously we might not realize, and consciously we might not even know that this is itself a part of logic. And that's why it's so beneficial, because logic organizes our thoughts. Logic gives us the ability to think correctly. It gives us that skill, that way of knowing and defining. Because one of the things which, inshallah, we will be speaking about is logic emphasizes on you defining words. And so with correct thinking and correct talking, you're going to be using words in the proper application. So you won't be using logical understanding of a word that is irrelevant to your conversation. Why? Because you have realized that in ilm al-mantiq, al-ta'rif, or definition, defining something is very, very important. You want to define what it is. And that's why you're going to also pick up on the definition of words and terms and things like that. And you will be able to find the correct word or the correct sentence and pinpoint on certain things. Yes, logic is something that is full of jargon, full of technical terms, full of theories, but the end result is wonderful. The end result is very, very useful. And you will indeed benefit very, very much from it. And that being said, you know, you're also going to be able to express yourself in the right way, because you're using this kind of sensible way of presenting your arguments, because logic supports your ideas. Logic will endorse your ability to want to offer something as far as an argument is concerned, a discussion is concerned, and you want to present this particular dalil, this evidence, in such a way where the result is going to be correct, where the opposite person is not going to be able to kind of like counter argue you based on the correct foundations of logic. Yes, they might use fallacy, mughalata. Again, that's another important reason as to why you need to study logic. Where is fallacy and mughalata studied? In logic. So you will be able to pinpoint, well, that's a fallacious argument, that's based on fallacy, and therefore, you know, the issue with that is, you know, the minor premise, the major premise, the conclusion, and whatnot. So, of course, when I'm saying, you know, but this is based on a fallacy, and you're presenting something as far as evidence and dalil and burhan and argument and things like that are concerned, you know, you're going to be more convincing when it comes to trying to discuss something with your opponents, an intellectual opponent, of course. You know, should we say that you want to use this? Again, you know, maybe that other person who's saying something to you, or you might hear something, you know, that sounds so flashy and so nice and things like that, but in reality it's not based on that correct kind of understanding as far as burhan is concerned, but rather it's jadal, it's dialectic, it's just sounding really, really nice, and it's flavored so much with slogans that when you look at the core of it, there's absolutely nothing there. And again, looking at something, I just said when you look at the core of it, and that, again, that's another benefit for logic, because it makes you critical. Your mind becomes more critical in knowing where to put your finger on the flaw of a particular argument. So you're able to critique in a healthier way, and even your own thoughts, you'll be more critical of your own thoughts as well. And you want to also make sure that, when you do hear something like this, when you do come across certain issues, and when you yourself read something, for example, then you want to make sure that you have some kind of mi'yar, some kind of scale, some kind of criteria where you are able to distinguish between the right and the wrong, the good and the bad. And that can only be done if you have that intellectual strength to be able to discern between all of these things. Now, if all of this sounds logic, if all of this sounds so straightforward, why do we need to discuss why should you study logic? Here we are going to see that we need to look into this with a lot of depth, because unfortunately there has been opposition to ilm al-mantiq, and we will discuss this in our next episode. Al-mantiq, of course, this is how you write logic in Arabic. And yes, even though it comes from the word nutq or nataqa, which means speaking, saying, talking, pronouncing, right? But and also you might even come across this word in hadith as well, mantiquhu so and so. It has nothing to do that. In most cases, that also has nothing to do with logic. It's talking about how they present themselves verbally, orally, in what they say. So we also need to be careful when we come across, for example, the word mantiq in our hadith sharif from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So here we're talking about the technical meaning of mantiq, which is ilm al-mantiq, and it means the science of logic. As I said, in the next episode, inshallah, I'm going to be speaking about opposition to logic, and why do we need to look at logic in this particular way, especially in light of the critique against mantiq, and what is it that some ulama have said about logic, and very simply, of course, try to refute these arguments in a brief way. Inshallah, we will be successful in presenting these different discussions. They are views mostly of our mainstream ulama, and also mixed with a little bit of my own experience, what I have to offer. And if I do say something that doesn't fit in line with your particular understanding, please correspond with me, initiate communication with me. We're able to discuss this, inshallah, in a logical way, and speak about these things. Ultimately, every person who has a process of thought, might see things in a particular way. But whatever it may be, the reason why I'm saying this is I like listening to feedback. I like receiving comments. And throughout my talk, if there's anything that comes to your mind, please, by all means, do not hesitate to communicate with me. Until our next episode, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.